Now let's begin. The morning Joshua Keenan left for the conference in Seattle, he kissed his daughter Emma's forehead while she slept. She was 6 years old, small for her age, with his dark hair and her mother's green eyes. He debated canceling the trip. 3 days felt like an eternity away from Emma, but Shannon had insisted everything would be fine. "My parents are coming to help," Shannon had said, her smile tight. Emma loved spending time with them. Joshua had learned not to argue with Shannon about her family. The Claytons and Andersons formed a tight clan in their small Missouri town, the kind of families whose roots went back generations, who owned the car dealership and the insurance agency and half the commercial real estate on Main Street. When Joshua, an outsider from Oregon, had married Shannon 8 years ago, he'd felt like he was joining something bigger than himself. Now, it felt more like being slowly suffocated. He'd grown up in the Cascade Mountains, raised by a single father who taught wilderness survival courses. After his dad died when Joshua was 19, he joined the Forest Service, eventually becoming a specialized wilderness rescue coordinator. He'd saved dozens of lives, could navigate by stars alone, could survive a week with nothing but a knife and his knowledge. When he met Shannon during a corporate team-building retreat he was leading, her polished sophistication had been intoxicating. She was everything he wasn't: connected, established, part of something permanent. But that permanence had a price. Shannon's father, Dick Anderson, owned Anderson Auto Empire, 3 dealerships across 2 counties. He was a large man, 62 years old, with the kind of presence that filled rooms and expected obedience. Carol Anderson, Shannon's mother, was quieter but no less formidable. She organized the women's auxiliary at their church, served on the school board, knew everyone's business. The family operated as a unit, and Joshua had never quite figured out how to penetrate their inner circle. Emma had been born a year into the marriage, and Joshua had hoped fatherhood would shift his position in the family hierarchy. Instead, he'd watched Shannon become more like her parents. She'd started criticizing his career. "Why are you still doing rescues? You're not in your 20s anymore." She'd pushed him toward management positions, toward stability, toward becoming someone he wasn't. The conference in Seattle was for emergency management coordinators. Joshua had tried to skip it, but his supervisor insisted. "You need the continuing education credits, Keenan. It's 3 days. Your family will survive." He'd called Emma twice on the first day, talked to her about the seals he'd seen at Pike Place Market, promised to bring her a stuffed orca. Shannon had sounded distracted both times. "We're fine, Josh. Stop hovering." The second day was when Tom Beach's text came through. Joshua was in a breakout session on technical rope rescue when his phone buzzed. Tom lived next door to them, a retired Marine who'd done 3 tours in Afghanistan before settling into civilian life as a contractor. He and Joshua had bonded over their shared understanding of what it meant to operate in high-stress environments. Tom didn't text unless it mattered. "Check your backyard camera." Now, Joshua's home security system was something he'd insisted on, partly from his rescue background. He'd seen too many emergencies that could have been prevented with early warning systems, and partly because something about Shannon's family had always made him uneasy. He'd installed cameras covering all entrances, the backyard, the driveway. He opened the app, his hands suddenly cold. The backyard camera showed his daughter tied to the oak tree near the swing set. Her arms were bound behind her around the trunk, her legs tied at the ankles. She was crying, screaming, her small body convulsing with terror. And she was covered, absolutely covered, in something dark and sticky that reflected the afternoon sun. "Honey." Dick Anderson stood nearby, holding an empty plastic bear-shaped container, laughing. Actually laughing, his head thrown back, his belly shaking. Carol Anderson was there too, arms folded, watching with a slight smile. Shannon, his wife, Emma's mother, was setting up a lawn chair, positioning it for the best view. She sat down, crossed her legs, and raised a glass of what looked like iced tea in a mock toast. Joshua's vision narrowed to a tunnel. He could hear Emma's screams through the phone's tiny speaker, desperate and raw. He watched as ants, already attracted by the honey, began crawling up her legs, her arms, into her hair. She was hysterical, thrashing against the ropes. There were others there too. He recognized Norman Barber, Shannon's uncle, his phone out recording. Tanya Morrison, Shannon's aunt, counting cash with her husband. Sarah Pollard and Christoph Gay, Shannon's cousins, passing a bottle of bourbon. Alan McCoy, Shannon's younger brother, was pointing at Emma and saying something that made Dick laugh harder. 12 people total. 12 members of Shannon's family gathered in his backyard, watching his daughter be tortured. Tom's next text came through. I called 911. Police are 8 minutes out. What do you need? Joshua stood up from the conference table so fast his chair fell backward. The instructor stopped mid-sentence. Every eye in the room turned to him, but Joshua was already moving, phone pressed to his ear. His hands weren't shaking. His breathing was controlled. Years of emergency response had trained him to channel panic into action. Curtis Bauer, he said when the lawyer answered. Curtis had helped him when he'd first moved to Missouri, had become something close to a friend. I need you at my house in 15 minutes. My daughter is being tortured by my wife and her family. I have it on camera. Police are already en route. Jesus Christ. I'm moving. Joshua was in the hallway now, breaking into a run toward the exit. Record everything. Make sure CPS is there. I want statements from everyone. And Curtis? I want full custody. Emergency order. Whatever it takes. Consider it done. Joshua pushed through the hotel's front doors into the Seattle afternoon. His rental car was in valet parking. He threw cash at the attendant, didn't wait for the receipt. 3 states away. At least 30 hours of driving. Even if he pushed straight through, he could catch a flight, but the next one wasn't for 4 hours, and by the time he got through security, drove from the airport. His phone buzzed again. Tom, police just arrived. Taking statements. Ambulance here for Emma. Family is trying to claim it was just a game. Joshua's jaw clenched so hard something in his skull popped. A game. They were calling this a game. He sat in the rental car, engine running, and made the second call. The phone rang 3 times before a gravelly voice answered. Keenan. Been a while. I need you, Beach. Tom Beach had been a Marine Raider before his retirement, the kind of operator who existed in the gray spaces between official military action and deniable operations. He and Joshua had met during a joint training exercise 5 years ago, when Joshua's wilderness rescue team had been teaching survival skills to special operations units. They'd kept in touch, the kind of friendship forged in mutual respect and shared competence. I saw, Tom said. I'm already at your house. Gave the police my camera footage too. Your security system caught everything, and I got angles they didn't know about. How bad is Emma? Paramedics are treating her now. Ant bites all over. Some of them fire ants. She's in shock, but she's talking. Keeps asking for you. Tom's voice dropped. Josh, what Shannon and her family did. This isn't normal dysfunction. This is sadistic. Organized. They planned this. I know. What do you need from me? Joshua pulled out of the hotel parking lot, pointing the car east. His mind was already working through scenarios, contingencies, outcomes. This wasn't a wilderness emergency, but the principle was the same. Assess the situation, identify resources, execute with precision. I need you to make sure Emma is safe. Stay with her. I don't care if you have to sleep in the hospital hallway. Don't let any of the Claytons or Andersons near her. Can you do that? Already planning on it. I've got photos of every person who was here. If any of them try to approach, I'll document it. Good. Joshua merged onto the highway, pressing the accelerator down. And Tom, I need you to start gathering intelligence. I want to know everything about Dick Anderson, Carol, Shannon, all of them. Every business dealing, every secret, every skeleton in every closet. Can you still access your old networks? There was a pause. Then, you planning something that could get you in trouble, Josh? They tortured my daughter while taking bets on how long she'd last. What do you think? Another pause, longer this time. Give me 48 hours. I'll have files on everyone who was in that yard. Thank you. Josh. Tom's voice was serious. Whatever you're planning, be smart. Don't give them ammunition to use against you in court. Your priority is Emma. I know. But Tom, when the legal part is done, when Emma is safe and this is settled, I'm going to make them understand what they did. I'm going to make them feel it. Understood. Drive safe. Your daughter needs you in one piece. Joshua ended the call and settled into the long drive ahead. The Seattle skyline disappeared in his rearview mirror as he pushed east through the mountains. His phone kept buzzing. Updates from Curtis about police reports, from Tom about Emma's condition, stable, being admitted overnight for observation, from his supervisor asking what the hell was going on. He didn't call Shannon. Didn't respond to her text that started appearing around the time the police arrived. This is a misunderstanding. You're overreacting. My father was just playing with her. You're going to ruin everything over nothing. Over nothing. Joshua drove through the night, stopping only for gas and coffee. He ate granola bars from his emergency kit, drank water from his Camelback, ignored the burning in his eyes. The road stretched endless through Washington, Idaho, Montana. His mind wouldn't stop replaying the footage. Emma's screams, Shannon's smile, Dick's laughter. At some point during the long Montana darkness, Joshua called his cousin in Oregon, the only family he had left. Zachary Burnett was a psychiatrist, someone who understood trauma and recovery. I need you to recommend a child psychologist, Joshua said. Someone who specializes in trauma from family abuse. The best you know. Zachary was quiet for a long moment. What happened? Joshua told him. Concise, factual, leaving nothing out. Jesus Christ, Josh. I'm so sorry. Zachary's professional calm wavered. I'll send you 3 names by morning. People I'd trust with my own kids. But Josh, this kind of trauma, especially from family, especially from her mother, Emma's going to need intensive support. And so will you. I'm fine. You're not. You can't be. But right now, you're in crisis mode, and that's keeping you functional. When this is over, when Emma is safe, it's going to hit you. Promise me you'll talk to someone. I promise. And Josh, whatever you're planning to do to them, don't. I wasn't going to try to stop you. I was going to say be thorough. People who do this once will do it again. Joshua felt something unodd in his chest. Thank you. The miles continued to fall away. Wyoming's open plains gave way to Nebraska's rolling hills, then Iowa's cornfields. Joshua stopped at a rest area outside Des Moines, splashed water on his face, did jumping jacks to stay alert. He had 12 more hours to think, to plan, to prepare. His phone showed 53 missed calls from Shannon's family. Dick Anderson had left voicemails ranging from conciliatory, "Son, I think we need to talk about this misunderstanding," to threatening, "You bring the police into family business. You're going to regret it." Carol Anderson sent emails about how children need discipline, how Emma was spoiled and needed to learn resilience. Norman Barber's message was short. "You always were an outsider, Keenan. Should have stayed in Oregon." Alan McCoy, Shannon's brother, sent the most interesting message. "Your marriage is over. You know that, right? No judge is going to give custody to a father who abandons his family and makes false accusations. We have lawyers too. Better ones." Joshua saved every message, every voicemail, every email. Evidence. By the time he crossed into Missouri, the sun was rising on his 3rd day away from home. He'd been driving for 26 straight hours. His eyes felt like sandpaper, his back ached, his hands were cramped from gripping the steering wheel. But his mind was clear. Curtis Bauer called as Joshua hit the city limits. "Emergency custody hearing is set for 10 this morning. I've got the police reports, the camera footage, witness statements from your neighbor. CPS has opened an investigation. Dick Anderson and Shannon are claiming it was a character-building exercise that got out of hand." Character building. Yeah. Apparently Dick used similar methods on his own kids. Shannon and Alan both have stories about being locked outside overnight, being made to sleep in the barn, being denied food as punishment. They're trying to frame it as old-fashioned parenting. Joshua's knuckles went white on the wheel. And Emma? She's at Children's Hospital. Tom Beach has been with her the whole time. She's asking for you. Curtis paused. "Josh," she told the child advocate that her mother told her this was happening because she'd been bad. That if she'd been a better daughter, Daddy wouldn't have had to go away and leave her with Grandpa. They were psychologically torturing her even before the physical abuse. Something cold and hard crystallized in Joshua's chest. "I'll be at the courthouse at 10. What do I need to know?" Shannon's lawyer is Vincent Price. Yes, that's really his name. He's expensive and he's vicious. He's going to paint you as an absent father who's trying to weaponize the legal system against his wife's family. They're going to bring up every business trip you've taken, every rescue call you've responded to. They're going to say you chose your job over your daughter. Let them try. Josh, you need to understand. The Andersons have deep roots in this county. They donate to judges' campaigns. They're in the Rotary Club with half the lawyers in town. This isn't going to be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is. Joshua pulled into the hospital parking lot. "I'm here. I'll see you at the courthouse." He ended the call and sat in the car for a moment, looking up at the hospital windows. Somewhere up there, Emma was waiting. Emma, who'd been tortured by her own family while her father was 3 states away. Joshua had spent his career pulling people out of impossible situations. Climbers stranded on cliff faces, hikers lost in blizzards, kayakers trapped in flash floods. He knew how to operate under pressure, how to make life or death decisions with incomplete information, how to never give up even when the odds seemed impossible. This was no different. Emma needed rescue, and Joshua Keenan never failed to rescue. He grabbed his bag from the trunk and headed inside. The antiseptic hospital smell hit him as soon as the doors opened. A volunteer at the desk directed him to pediatrics, 4th floor. The elevator seemed to take forever. Tom Beach was sitting in a chair outside room 417, looking exactly like what he was, a warrior standing guard. He stood when he saw Joshua, and the two men clasped hands briefly. "She's asleep," Tom said quietly. "She woke up crying around 4, and the nurse gave her something to help. Doc says physically she'll be fine. The bites are being treated, no infections. But mentally," he shook his head. "She flinches when anyone comes near her. Won't let go of the stuffed animal the nurse gave her. Thank you for being here. Nowhere else I'd be." Tom handed Joshua a USB drive. "Everything's on here. My footage, your security footage, photos I took of everyone who was there. Curtis has copies too. And Josh, I made some calls. Got preliminary background on the Anderson clan. It's not pretty. Tell me. Not now? You need to see your daughter." Tom stepped aside. "I'll be here when you come out. Then we'll talk strategy." Joshua pushed open the door to room 417. Emma was small in the hospital bed, surrounded by white sheets and monitoring equipment. Her arms and legs were bandaged where the ant bites had been worst. Her face was swollen from crying. Even asleep, she looked frightened. Joshua crossed the room on silent feet and sat in the chair beside her bed. He took her small hand in his, carefully, so carefully, and felt tears burning in his eyes for the first time since Tom's initial text. "I'm here, sweetheart," he whispered. "Daddy's here. And I promise you, I promise, they will never hurt you again." Emma's eyes fluttered open. For a moment she looked confused, disoriented. Then she focused on his face, and something in her expression broke. "Daddy." She tried to sit up, reaching for him, and Joshua carefully gathered her into his arms. She was sobbing, clinging to him, her small body shaking. He held her, rocked her, murmured reassurances that felt inadequate against what she'd endured. "I'm sorry," she kept saying. "I'm sorry I was bad. I'm sorry, Daddy." "You weren't bad, Emma. You were never bad. None of this was your fault." He pulled back enough to look at her face, to make sure she could see his eyes. "What they did was wrong. Do you understand? Grandpa and Grandma and Mommy, what they did was wrong." She nodded, but he could see the confusion there, the conflict. She was 6 years old. These were the adults who were supposed to protect her. "I want to go home," she said. "Soon. We have to see some people first, talk to some nice people who want to make sure you're safe. But Emma, listen to me." He waited until she was looking at him again. "From now on, it's you and me. I'm going to keep you safe. I'm going to make sure nobody ever hurts you again. Do you believe me?" "Yes, Daddy." But he could see the shadow of doubt in her eyes, and it tore him apart. He'd been 3 states away when she needed him most. He'd trusted his wife, his in-laws, and that trust had nearly destroyed his daughter. He would never make that mistake again. A nurse came in to check Emma's vitals, followed by a child advocate from CPS. Joshua recognized the methodical process, the questions designed to assess Emma's state of mind, to document her version of events, to build a case. He'd seen it before in his rescue work, the aftermath when they pulled children from dangerous situations. But this was different. This was his child, and the danger had come from within. By 9:30, Curtis Bauer arrived to take Joshua to the courthouse. Emma clung to him, not wanting him to leave, until Tom came in with a promise. "Hey, Emma," Tom said, kneeling beside the bed. "Your dad has to go be a superhero for a little while, but I'm going to stay right here with you. And when he comes back, he's going to make sure you never have to be scared again. That sound okay?" Emma looked at Tom, then at Joshua, then nodded slowly. Joshua kissed her forehead. "I'll be back as soon as I can. Be brave for me, okay?" "Okay, Daddy." He left before she could see his hands shaking. In Curtis's car on the way to the courthouse, Joshua finally let himself feel the full weight of what had happened. Curtis, bless him, didn't try to fill the silence with empty reassurances. He just drove, giving Joshua space to process. "They're going to try to destroy you," Curtis said eventually. Vincent Price is going to paint you as an absent father, a hothead, someone who's using false allegations as a weapon in a custody dispute. He's going to make Shannon and Dick look like victims of your aggression. Let him try. Josh, I need to know. Are you going to keep your cool in there? Because if you lose your temper, if you give them anything they can use. I won't. Curtis glanced at him. You're too calm. That worries me more than if you were raging. I spent 15 years pulling people out of life or death situations. You learn to compartmentalize. I'll fall apart later. Right now, I have a job to do. The courthouse was a grand old building in the center of town, all marble columns and brass fixtures. Joshua had been here once before for a traffic ticket. Now he was here to fight for his daughter. Shannon was in the hallway with her parents and her lawyer. She dressed carefully, conservative dress, minimal makeup, the picture of a concerned mother. When she saw Joshua, something flickered across her face. Fear? Calculation? It was gone too quickly to read. Dick Anderson was in a suit that probably cost more than Joshua's monthly salary. He looked angry, his face red, his jaw tight. Carol stood beside him, icy and composed. Vincent Price was talking to them in low tones, his silver hair perfectly styled, his suit immaculate. Joshua felt Curtis's hand on his elbow, a gentle warning. Don't engage. Don't give them anything. They went into the courtroom. Judge Samantha Rivera presiding. Curtis had said she was fair, not in the Andersons' pocket, which was why he'd requested her specifically for the emergency hearing. The next hour was brutal. Vincent Price painted a picture of Joshua as an absentee father who'd abandoned his family for a work conference, who'd overreacted to what was at most an error in judgment by well-meaning grandparents. He showed photos of Dick Anderson as a pillar of the community, donations to the Children's Hospital, awards from the Chamber of Commerce, testimonials from employees about what a great man he was. Shannon testified with tears in her eyes about how Joshua had become distant, how he prioritized work over family, how she'd been trying to hold everything together. She claimed Emma had begged to spend time with her grandparents, that Dick had simply been teaching her resilience the way he'd taught his own children. Emma is a sensitive child, Shannon said, dabbing at her eyes. She overreacts to everything. Dick didn't realize she'd react so dramatically to a little discomfort. It was never meant to go that far. Joshua sat perfectly still through all of it, his expression neutral, his hands folded on the table. Only Curtis, sitting beside him, could feel the coiled tension in his body, like a spring compressed to its limit. Then it was their turn. Curtis played the security footage. All of it. Dick Anderson tying Emma to the tree. The honey. Emma's screams. Shannon setting up her chair. The 12 family members making bets, recording, laughing. The aunts. The courtroom went silent. Judge Rivera's face hardened. Curtis presented the police reports, the medical documentation, the witness statement from Tom Beach. He showed the voicemails and texts from the Anderson family, the threats, the attempts at intimidation. Then Joshua testified. He was concise, factual, devastating. He explained his career in wilderness rescue, his training in crisis response, his understanding of trauma and survival. He described receiving Tom's text, making the calls, driving through the night. Your Honor, he said, looking directly at Judge Rivera, I've spent 15 years saving lives. I've pulled children from avalanches, from drowning, from situations where minutes meant the difference between life and death. I've never seen anything as calculated and sadistic as what my wife and her family did to my daughter. This wasn't discipline. This wasn't poor judgment. This was torture, and they enjoyed it. Vincent Price tried to object, but Judge Rivera waved him off. Mr. Keenan, she said, what are you asking for? Full custody. No contact with the mother or her family until a thorough psychological evaluation can be completed. Protection for my daughter from people who see her pain as entertainment. Judge Rivera looked at the footage again, at the reports, at Shannon and Dick Anderson. Emergency custody is granted to the father, she said. Mrs. Keenan, you will have no contact with the minor child pending a full custody hearing in 30 days. Mr. Anderson, Mrs. Anderson, and all family members present during this incident are barred from contact with the child. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. This court is adjourned. Shannon's face went white. Dick Anderson stood up, shouting something about his rights, about persecution, about connections. His lawyer tried to calm him down, but Dick was beyond calm. You'll regret this, Keenan, he shouted as bailiffs moved toward him. You think you can come into this town and destroy this family? You have no idea who you're dealing with. Joshua turned, looked Dick Anderson in the eye, and smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. No, Mr. Anderson. You have no idea who you're dealing with. The bailiffs escorted Dick out, still shouting threats. Shannon left with her mother, both of them stone-faced. Vincent Price gathered his materials with the air of a man planning his next move. Curtis put a hand on Joshua's shoulder. You won. Emma's safe. For now, Joshua said. But they're not done. And neither am I. They left the courthouse through a side exit, avoiding the small crowd of reporters that had gathered. News traveled fast in a small town, especially when it involved prominent families. By evening, the story would be everywhere. Good. Joshua wanted everyone to know what the Anderson family really was. Back at the hospital, Emma was awake and eating Jell-O. She brightened when she saw Joshua, reaching for him immediately. Did you win, Daddy? I won, sweetheart. You're coming home with me. And nobody from Mommy's family is allowed to come near you. Not even Mommy. Joshua's heart broke a little. Not even Mommy. Not right now. Is that okay? Emma thought about it, her small face serious. Then she nodded. Okay. I don't want to see her right now anyway. Tom Beach appeared in the doorway with a duffel bag. Packed some things from the house. Figured you wouldn't want to go back there yet. He set the bag down, then pulled Joshua aside. We need to talk. The files I mentioned. You're going to want to see them before you decide what to do next. Joshua looked at Emma, safe in the hospital bed, surrounded by monitoring equipment and stuffed animals. Then he looked at Tom. Tomorrow, he said. Tonight, I'm staying with my daughter. Fair enough. I'll be at my place when you're ready. Josh, Tom's expression was serious. What I found, it goes deeper than you think. The Andersons have been doing this kind of thing for a long time. Emma wasn't the first. Something cold settled in Joshua's chest. Tell me you have proof. I have proof. And Josh, when you see it, you're going to want to burn their entire world down. Just make sure you do it smart. Tom left, and Joshua returned to Emma's bedside. She fell asleep holding his hand, her breathing finally calm and steady. The nurse brought him a blanket and a pillow, and he settled into the uncomfortable hospital chair for the night. But he didn't sleep. He couldn't. His mind was already working through scenarios, through plans, through exactly how he was going to make the Anderson family pay for what they'd done. He'd won custody. Emma was safe. The legal battle was just beginning, but he'd protect her through all of it. And then, once the courts were done, once Emma was healing, once everything was settled and secure, Joshua Keenan was going to show Dick Anderson and his entire family what it meant to be truly afraid. They'd tied his daughter to a tree and covered her in honey to watch the ants devour her. They'd made bets on her suffering. They'd laughed at her screams. Joshua had spent his career in the wilderness, learning nature's laws, understanding survival and predator and prey. The Andersons were about to learn those lessons too. And unlike Emma's ordeal, theirs wouldn't end in 45 minutes. The morning after the custody hearing, Joshua signed Emma out of the hospital. She held his hand tightly as they walked to the car, flinching at every sudden movement, every loud noise. Tom Beach had arranged for them to stay at a short-term rental on the other side of town, a small house, quiet street, far from Anderson territory. Emma explored her new temporary home with cautious curiosity while Joshua unpacked the bags Tom had brought. Clothes, toys, some of Emma's favorite books. Tom had been thorough, even remembering her stuffed penguin that she slept with every night. Daddy. Emma appeared in the doorway of the bedroom he was setting up for her. Is Mommy mad at me? Joshua knelt down to her level. No, sweetheart. Mommy made bad choices. That's not your fault. None of this is your fault. But she said, Emma's lip trembled. She said if I was better, you wouldn't leave us. She said I made you go away. White-hot rage flashed through Joshua, but he kept his voice calm. Emma, look at me. I went to Seattle for work. Just 3 days. I've gone on work trips before, remember? I always come back. Mommy lied to you. She lied to make you think you did something wrong. But you didn't. She lied. Yes. Emma processed this, her small face working through complicated emotions. Grown-ups aren't supposed to lie. No, they're not. But sometimes they do. And when they do, there are consequences. The doorbell rang, and Emma jumped. Joshua squeezed her hand reassuringly before checking the security camera on his phone. Curtis Bauer, with a woman Joshua didn't recognize. He opened the door to find his lawyer and a kind-faced woman in her 50s. "Josh, this is Dr. Elisa Phillips. She's the child psychologist your cousin recommended. I took the liberty of calling her." Dr. Phillips smiled warmly. "Mr. Keenan, I've reviewed Emma's case file. I'd like to start sessions as soon as possible, if you're comfortable with that." Joshua looked back at Emma, who was peering around the doorframe. "Emma, this is Dr. Phillips. She's someone who helps kids who've had scary things happen. Would you like to talk to her?" Emma hesitated, then nodded slowly. They settled in the living room. Emma on the couch with her penguin, Dr. Phillips in a chair, Joshua within sight, but giving them space. Curtis handed Joshua a thick folder. Discovery from Shannon's side. Vincent Price is pushing for a full custody trial in 3 weeks instead of 30 days. He's confident. Let him be confident. Joshua opened the folder, scanning the documents. Affidavits from Shannon's family members claiming he was abusive, neglectful, mentally unstable. Bank statements showing he'd spent money on unnecessary outdoor equipment instead of Emma's needs. Work schedules highlighting every night he'd been called out for rescue operations. "They're trying to paint you as someone who prioritizes adventure over family," Curtis said quietly. "Someone who married Shannon for her family's money and stability, then resented the obligations that came with it." Joshua looked up sharply. "That's bullshit. I know, but they're going to try to make it stick. They're claiming Emma's sensitivity is a result of your parenting style, that you've made her fearful of normal discipline by overprotecting her. They're saying the honey incident was an attempt to teach her resilience, which you failed to instill. An attempt that involved 12 people betting on how long she'd last while being eaten by ants. We have that on video. But Vincent Price is going to argue that the betting was crude humor, not serious gambling. That it was in poor taste, but not abusive. That Dick Anderson comes from a generation that valued toughness over coddling." Joshua closed the folder. "What do you need from me?" "Character witnesses. People who can testify to your parenting, your relationship with Emma, your stability and judgment. I'm thinking your colleagues from the Forest Service, maybe your cousin the psychiatrist, neighbors who've seen you with Emma." "Tom Beach. Your neighbor?" "Absolutely. His testimony at the emergency hearing was crucial." "But Josh," Curtis hesitated. "Tom Beach is former military. Special operations. Vincent Price is going to try to use that, make it seem like you have dangerous connections, that you're capable of violence." "I am capable of violence. So is every parent when their child is threatened. The difference is control." Curtis studied him. "You're planning something. Beyond the legal case. I'm planning to protect my daughter and make sure the people who hurt her face consequences. Legal consequences, right? Because anything else leaves evidence." "I know." Joshua stood up. "I need to meet with Tom. Can you stay with Emma and Dr. Phillips?" "Of course. But Josh, be careful. The Andersons are already claiming you're unstable and vindictive. Don't prove them right." Joshua grabbed his jacket and headed next door to Tom's rental. The former Marine was at his dining table, laptop open, surrounded by papers and photographs. "Coffee," Tom offered. "Information." Tom nodded and pulled out a file folder. Dick Anderson, age 62. Built Anderson Auto Empire from a single used car lot 40 years ago. Married to Carol for 38 years. 2 children, Shannon and Alan. Net worth estimated at $15 million. "I don't care about his money." "You should. Because here's where it gets interesting." Tom pulled out a series of photographs. Dick Anderson has a pattern. Every employee who's quit under suspicious circumstances, every terminated contract, every business deal gone bad, there's a common thread. People who cross him disappear. Not literally, but professionally. They lose jobs, get blacklisted, find themselves suddenly unemployable in this county. How? He's connected. Owns the car dealerships, sure, but he also has silent partnerships in the town bank, the major insurance agency, half the commercial properties on Main Street. He sits on boards, makes donations, plays golf with judges and city council members. He's built a power structure, and he uses it. Tom pulled out another file. Carol Anderson. Born Carol Olson, married Dick right out of high school. No criminal record, pillar of the community, very active in church and civic organizations. But he slid over some newspaper clippings. 3 foster children placed with the Andersons in the 80s. All 3 were removed within a year. No official reports, records sealed. But I found the social worker who handled the case. She's retired now, living in Florida. She talked. Joshua's hands clenched. What did she say? Dick and Carol viewed foster children as free labor, made them sleep in an unheated shed, denied them food as punishment, forced them to do manual labor at the car lot. When one of the kids ran away and told a teacher, CPS investigated. But Dick's connections shut it down. The kids were removed quietly. The Andersons were blacklisted from fostering, and the whole thing went away. Jesus Christ. It gets worse. Tom pulled out more documents. Shannon and Alan Anderson. Both were subjected to similar treatment growing up. Shannon's high school journal. I found parts of it through an ex-boyfriend who kept some of her letters. She described being locked in the basement overnight for bad grades, being forced to run laps until she vomited for talking back, being made to kneel on rice as punishment. Joshua felt sick. She became exactly like them. Cycle of abuse. Alan's the same. Got arrested twice for assault in college. Charges dropped both times because daddy made donations to the right people. He works at the dealership now, lives in a house Dick owns, is completely under his father's thumb. What about the others? The people at the house that day? Tom pulled out a chart. Norman Barber, Carol's brother. He's Dick's business partner in the insurance agency. Divorced 3 times, history of domestic violence allegations, none of which stuck. Tanya Morrison, Carol's sister-in-law, married to Carol's late brother. She's Dick's accountant. The cousins, Sarah Pollard and Christoph Gay, both work for Anderson businesses in some capacity. Everyone in that yard that day is financially dependent on Dick Anderson. He bought their complicity. Worse, he cultivated it. Created a family culture where abuse is normal, where the weak are targets, where loyalty to the clan trumps everything else. And Josh. Tom leaned forward. Emma wasn't the first grandchild. Alan has a daughter, age 8, lives with her mother 2 counties over after a nasty divorce. I contacted the mother. She has stories about the Andersons that'll make your blood run cold. She got Emma out before they could do too much damage, but she's been fighting a smear campaign ever since. Joshua stood up, paced to the window. Outside, it was a normal suburban morning. People walking dogs, kids riding bikes. Normal life, continuing while his world burned. I want to talk to her. Alan's ex-wife. I arranged it. She's driving up tomorrow. Her name is Erin Strickland. She's willing to testify in your custody case, and she's got documentation Curtis can use. Good. Joshua turned back to Tom. What else? The dealerships. Dick runs them through a combination of pressure and exploitation. High employee turnover, lots of complaints to the labor board that never went anywhere. He's got 3 managers who've been with him for decades. They're all true believers in his methods. Loyalty above all else. Tom pulled out financial records. But here's the thing. Dick's empire isn't as solid as it looks. He's been making some bad investments. There's a commercial property deal that went south, a franchise expansion that failed. He's leveraged, Josh. Not broke, but not nearly as secure as he pretends. How leveraged? Enough that if his reputation took a major hit, if customers started going elsewhere, if his partners started questioning his judgment, it could hurt. Bad. Joshua looked at the files spread across Tom's table. Evidence of decades of abuse, of power misused, of children damaged. Emma was just the latest in a long line. I'm going to destroy him, Joshua said quietly. Not just beat him in court. Not just get custody. I'm going to take apart everything he's built. I figured you'd say that. Tom pulled out another folder. Which is why I made this. Blueprints. Financial pressure points. People who've been hurt by the Andersons who might be willing to go public. Journalists who'd be interested in the story. Every angle I could think of. Joshua opened the folder. It was thorough, detailed, strategic. You've been busy. I've got time and skills and a strong dislike for people who hurt kids. Plus, Tom's expression hardened. I've seen what happens when powerful people think they're untouchable. They keep hurting people until someone stops them. Shannon and her family tortured your daughter, Josh. They need to be stopped. They will be. Joshua gathered the files. But carefully, systematically. I need Emma safe first, custody finalized, her trauma addressed. The Andersons can't know what's coming. They need to think they're winning right up until the moment they realize they've lost everything. The long game. The only game worth playing. Joshua checked his phone. A text from Curtis saying Emma's session with Dr. Phillips was going well. I should get back. Can you send me digital copies of everything? Already done. Encrypted files, sent to the email you set up last night. Tom walked him to the door. Josh, be patient. I know you want to burn their world down right now, but if you move too fast, you'll give them time to recover. Let them think they're safe. Let them get cocky. Then strike when they're not looking. I know. I've extracted people from avalanche zones. You don't just dig randomly. You probe, you plan, you make sure every move counts. Exactly. And Josh, Tom gripped his shoulder. You're not alone in this. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, I've got your back. Joshua clasped his hand. Thank you. For everything. Back at the rental house, Dr. Phillips was finishing up her session with Emma. Curtis was on the phone with someone, talking legal strategy. Emma ran to Joshua when she saw him, and he scooped her up. Dr. Phillips says I'm very brave, Emma announced. You are very brave, Joshua agreed. Dr. Phillips stood. Mr. Keenan, could we speak privately for a moment? They stepped into the kitchen. Dr. Phillips kept her voice low. Emma is resilient, but she's been severely traumatized. The physical abuse was bad enough, but the psychological manipulation, being told she was being punished for your absence, for being bad, that's going to take time to heal. She's going to need regular therapy, a stable environment, and absolute consistency from you. She'll have it. I'm also concerned about her relationship with her mother. Emma loves Shannon, but she's also afraid of her. That cognitive dissonance is painful for a child. We'll need to work through that carefully. Shannon's not getting near her. Not now, certainly. But eventually, the courts may grant supervised visitation. We need to prepare Emma for that possibility. Help her understand that she can love her mother and still recognize that what Shannon did was wrong. Joshua nodded tightly. Whatever Emma needs. Good. I'd like to see her 3 times a week initially, then reassess. And Mr. Keenan? You should consider therapy for yourself as well. Secondary trauma is real, and you're going to be Emma's rock through this. You need to make sure you're stable too. I'll think about it. Dr. Phillips gave him a knowing look. That's what everyone says. But from what I've seen today, you're a good father who's been put in an impossible situation. Don't let anger consume you. Emma needs you present, not plotting revenge. I can do both. She sighed. I'm sure you can. Just remember, the best revenge is living well and raising your daughter to be healthy and happy despite what they did. After Dr. Phillips left, Curtis reviewed the custody timeline. Full hearing in 3 weeks. Shannon's pushing for joint custody, claiming you're alienating Emma from her mother. We'll need to document everything. Emma's therapy sessions, your work schedule, every interaction. The judge will look at what's in Emma's best interest. And what about criminal charges? Joshua asked. Dick Anderson committed assault and child abuse. Shannon was complicit. Why are they walking free? Curtis grimaced. Small town, powerful family. The DA declined to prosecute, said there wasn't enough evidence of criminal intent. The video shows abuse, yes, but Price convinced them it was a misguided disciplinary measure, not intentional torture. That's bullshit. I know, but this is how the system works when you're rich and connected. Our focus has to be civil court, custody, restraining orders, protecting Emma. We can revisit criminal charges later if needed. Joshua watched Emma playing with her toys in the living room, her small hands arranging plastic animals in careful rows. She was safe for now. That was what mattered. But Curtis was wrong about one thing. The system wasn't the only way to get justice. Over the next 3 weeks, Joshua built his case and his life around Emma's needs. He reduced his work schedule to part-time, arranging his shifts so he was home when Emma needed him. He attended every therapy session, learned strategies from Dr. Phillips for managing Emma's trauma responses, created routines, and stability. He also built his other case, the one Curtis didn't know about. Tom's files became Joshua's evening reading after Emma went to bed. He memorized the network of Anderson power, who owed them favors, who feared them, who might be willing to turn against them. He studied Dick's business model, looking for weaknesses. He made lists of people the Andersons had hurt over the years, potential allies in what was coming. Erin Strickland, Alan's ex-wife, testified for Joshua's custody case and shared her own horror stories about the Anderson family. Her daughter, Joshua's niece by marriage, though he'd barely been allowed to meet her, had been disciplined by being locked in closets, forced to eat hot peppers, made to stand in the cold until she apologized for imagined infractions. Erin had documented everything, fought for sole custody, won, and then spent years defending her decision as the Andersons tried to destroy her reputation. They're still trying, she told Joshua over coffee one morning. I lost 2 jobs because of their influence. Had to move counties. But my daughter is safe, and that's all that matters. Whatever you're planning to do to them, count me in. I'm just focusing on custody right now, Joshua said carefully. Aaron smiled without humor. Sure you are. But when you're ready for phase 2, when you decide to really make them pay, remember that you're not the only one they've hurt. There's a whole network of us. Ex-employees, ex-spouses, people they've crushed under their boots. We've been waiting for someone to stand up to Dick Anderson. Someone he can't intimidate or buy off. Joshua filed that information away. The custody hearing arrived. Judge Rivera presiding again, which Curtis considered a good sign. The courtroom was packed, Shannon and her family on one side, Joshua and his witnesses on the other. Vincent Price was polished and persuasive, arguing that Shannon had made an error in judgment but was otherwise a devoted mother. He brought teachers who testified that Emma loved her mother, neighbors who'd seen Shannon at PTA meetings, photos of birthday parties and family vacations. My client acknowledges that the incident was inappropriate, Price said smoothly. But it was an isolated event, influenced by her father's outdated ideas about child rearing. Shannon has since distanced herself from those methods. She's enrolled in parenting classes. She wants nothing more than to rebuild her relationship with her daughter. Curtis countered with Dr. Phillips's testimony about Emma's trauma, about the deliberate psychological manipulation, about the pattern of abuse in the Anderson family. He showed the video again, every minute of it, forcing the courtroom to watch Emma's suffering while Shannon sipped iced tea and Dick laughed. He brought Tom Beach, who testified about what he'd seen that day, about Shannon's casual cruelty, about the family making bets. He brought Aaron Strickland, who detailed the Anderson family's history of abuse. He brought Emma's pediatrician, who documented the physical injuries and the emotional damage. And then Curtis called Joshua. Mr. Keenan, describe your relationship with your daughter. Joshua talked about bedtime stories and hiking trips, about teaching Emma to identify birds and track animals, about her curiosity and kindness. He talked about the father-daughter dances and the science fair projects, about being present for every school event he could manage. And your wife? How would you characterize her parenting? Joshua chose his words carefully. Shannon was attentive when we had an audience. But behind closed doors, she was critical. She told Emma she was too sensitive, too emotional, too much like me. She said Emma needed to be tougher. I didn't realize, his voice caught. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten. I thought it was just Shannon's style. I didn't know her family had normalized abuse to the point where torturing a child seemed acceptable. Vincent Price cross-examined, trying to paint Joshua as someone who'd been absent, who'd prioritized work, who was now weaponizing the court system. Isn't it true, Mr. Keenan, that you've missed multiple parent-teacher conferences for work? I've missed 3 in 6 years. All for emergency rescue operations where lives were at stake. And you frequently work overnight shifts, leaving Emma in your wife's care? I work a rotating schedule that includes some night shifts, yes. That's standard for emergency response. So you entrusted your daughter to Shannon's care regularly, but now you're claiming she's an unfit mother? I entrusted my daughter to someone I thought I knew. I was wrong. The moment I learned what Shannon was capable of, I took action to protect Emma. By making 2 phone calls, one to a lawyer, one to a former Special Forces operative. Didn't it occur to you to call your wife first? To ask what was happening? Joshua leaned forward. I saw what was happening. My daughter was tied to a tree, covered in honey, being eaten alive by ants while 12 members of my wife's family made bets on her suffering. I didn't need to ask what was happening. I needed to stop it. The courtroom was silent. Vincent Price tried another angle. You have a dangerous job, Mr. Keenan. High-risk rescues, often in remote locations. How can you guarantee Emma's safety when your work involves such risks? I've been doing wilderness rescue for 15 years without a serious injury. I'm trained, certified, and experienced. Emma has never been at risk from my work, but she was at risk from her own family. That's why we're here. Judge Rivera called a recess. Curtis and Joshua waited in a conference room while the judge reviewed evidence. You did well, Curtis said. Rivera's hard to read, but I think she's leaning our way. Joshua wasn't so sure. Small town, powerful family. The Andersons had connections everywhere. But when they returned to the courtroom, Judge Rivera's expression was granite. I've reviewed all testimony and evidence, she said. This court finds that Shannon Keenan, while not criminally charged, participated in and enabled the abuse of her daughter Emma. The evidence shows a pattern of psychological manipulation and physical abuse within the Anderson family structure. Shannon's face went white. Furthermore, the court finds no evidence that Shannon has made meaningful changes to her behavior or separated herself from the family members who participated in this abuse. Accordingly, full custody is awarded to Joshua Keenan. Shannon Keenan is granted supervised visitation, 1 hour per week, to be supervised by a court-appointed monitor. Shannon stood up. "Your Honor, please. Mrs. Keenan, you watched your daughter be tortured and did nothing to stop it. You actively participated. You told your child she deserved it. I have 6-year-olds testifying in my courtroom about abuse, and I have to look them in the eye and promise them they'll be safe. I can't make that promise if I give you custody. This hearing is concluded." Dick Anderson erupted. "This is bullshit. We have rights. We're going to appeal. We're going to." The bailiff moved toward him, and Vincent Price grabbed his arm, pulling him back. The whole Anderson family filed out, shooting murderous looks at Joshua. Curtis was grinning. "We won. Full custody, minimal visitation. That's about as good as it gets." Joshua felt relief wash over him, but also something darker. This was just the beginning. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Joshua gave a brief statement, thanking the court, expressing hope that Emma could heal, declining to discuss details. Professional, calm, controlled. What he didn't say, that this was phase 1 of a longer plan, that the Andersons thought they'd lost a battle, but they were about to lose the war. That night, after Emma was asleep, Joshua sat down at his laptop and began phase 2. He started with the Anderson dealership's customer reviews. Tom had found dozens of complaints. People overcharged, sold defective vehicles, lied to about warranties. Joshua began reaching out to each one personally, offering to listen to their stories. Many were still angry, still wanting justice, but not knowing how to get it. Joshua gave them a path. Encouraged them to file formal complaints, to share their experiences on social media, to contact consumer protection agencies. Individually, each complaint was minor. Together, they began to build a picture of systematic fraud and abuse. Next, he contacted the journalists Tom had identified. Local reporters who'd covered the Anderson family over the years, always painting them as pillars of the community. Joshua offered them a different story, exclusive access to court documents, testimony from abuse victims, evidence of the family's pattern of behavior. "This isn't about one incident," he told a reporter from the regional newspaper. "This is about a family that's been abusing power and people for decades." Emma's case just brought it to light. The first article ran 3 days later. Local business family faces abuse allegations. It detailed the custody case, included quotes from Aaron Strickland, referenced the sealed foster care cases from the 80s. The Andersons tried to suppress it, but the story was already spreading. Social media picked it up. Local Facebook groups debated it. Suddenly, everyone had an Anderson story, a bad car deal, a business dealing gone wrong, rumors of how Dick treated employees. The dealership's sales numbers began to drop. Joshua also worked a different angle. He contacted the insurance companies that provided coverage for Anderson businesses, provided them with evidence of the abuse, suggested that insuring companies with such leadership might be a liability. He contacted franchise corporations that Anderson dealerships represented, made similar suggestions. Were they comfortable having their brand associated with child abuse? Quietly, methodically, he began dismantling Dick Anderson's empire from the outside in. Tom helped, using his networks to spread information, to make connections, to ensure the story kept growing. Aaron Strickland reached out to other ex-employees, other people the Andersons had hurt, building a coalition. "It's like watching dominoes fall," Tom said one evening. "Once people realize they're not alone, that they can speak up without being crushed, they start talking." Joshua tracked every development in a spreadsheet. Insurance companies reviewing policies, franchise corporations asking questions, customer complaints mounting. The Anderson family's reputation, once unassailable, beginning to crack. But he wasn't done. The empire was crumbling, but Dick Anderson himself was still untouched. Still wealthy, still connected, still dangerous. That needed to change. Joshua had one more plan, darker and more personal than the rest. Dick Anderson had tortured Emma using nature, ants, honey, the outdoors as a weapon. Joshua was going to return the favor. He just needed to wait for the right moment. 6 weeks after winning custody, Joshua received a call from Vincent Price's office. Shannon wanted to see Emma. She's entitled to her supervised visitation, the paralegal said. Court order is clear. Joshua agreed to the meeting at a neutral location, a child therapy center with observation rooms and trained supervisors. Dr. Phillips would be present. Emma had been preparing for this in therapy, working through her complicated feelings about her mother. I love Mommy, Emma had said during one session, but I don't want her to hurt me again. That's okay, Dr. Phillips had assured her. You can love someone and still need to be safe from them. The visitation was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. Joshua brought Emma to the center early, made sure she understood the rules. The supervisor would be there the whole time. Daddy would be right outside. She could leave whenever she wanted. Emma nodded, clutching her stuffed penguin. Shannon arrived exactly on time, looking smaller than Joshua remembered. She'd lost weight. Her face was drawn, and there were circles under her eyes. She brightened when she saw Emma, then seemed to catch herself, kneeling down to Emma's level. Hi, baby. I've missed you so much. Emma hesitated, then took a small step forward. Hi, Mommy. The supervisor led them to a playroom. Joshua watched through the one-way glass. Shannon was trying, bringing toys Emma liked, asking about school, being gentle. Emma responded cautiously, not quite trusting. After 30 minutes, Shannon made a mistake. Sweetie, I'm so sorry about what happened. Grandpa didn't mean to scare you. He was trying to make you stronger. Like he did with me when I was little. It wasn't supposed to be scary. Emma's face changed. Dr. Phillips says it was wrong. She says grown-ups aren't supposed to hurt kids, even to make them stronger. Dr. Phillips is, Shannon caught herself. Dr. Phillips is right. But honey, don't you think you're being a little dramatic about this? It was only an hour. You're fine now. Emma stood up. I want Daddy. The supervisor called Joshua in. Emma ran to him, and Shannon's face crumpled. Please, Emma. I'm sorry. I miss you. I want my daughter back. You gave her up when you watched her be tortured, Joshua said quietly. Visitation is over. They left Shannon crying in the playroom. In the car, Emma was quiet. Joshua didn't push her to talk. When they got home, she went straight to her room, and Joshua heard her talking to her stuffed animals, working through what had happened. Dr. Phillips called an hour later. Shannon showed no real understanding of what she did wrong. She's still minimizing, still trying to justify. Emma picked up on that immediately. These visits might do more harm than good. Can we stop them? We can document Shannon's lack of insight and request a modification. But Josh, Shannon's being pressured by her family. I could see it in her body language. She's torn between protecting Emma and staying loyal to the Andersons. She made her choice. Maybe. Or maybe she's still trapped in the same abuse cycle she grew up in. That doesn't excuse what she did, but it's worth understanding. Joshua didn't care about understanding Shannon's motivations. He cared about protecting Emma. But Dr. Phillips's words stuck with him. Shannon was trapped. The whole family was trapped in Dick Anderson's web of power and abuse, which meant the key to destroying them all was destroying Dick. The opportunity came 2 weeks later. Tom called with news. Dick Anderson is going on his annual hunting trip. Every year, he takes his inner circle, Alan, Norman, a few loyal employees, to a private hunting ranch in Montana. They'll be gone for 5 days. Joshua felt something click into place. Tell me everything. It's a tradition. Dick's way of rewarding loyalty. They hunt elk, drink expensive whiskey, bond over masculine bullshit. The ranch is remote. No cell service, no internet. They pride themselves on being off the grid. When do they leave? Next Thursday. Josh, I know that look. Whatever you're thinking. I'm thinking Dick Anderson used the wilderness as a weapon against my daughter. Turnabout is fair play. Tom was quiet for a long moment. You need help? Not this time. This is personal. Be careful. And Josh, make it count. Joshua spent the next week planning. He knew wilderness survival better than anyone. He'd spent years in conditions that would kill unprepared people. He understood hypothermia, dehydration, exposure, fear. Dick Anderson was about to get an education. The day before Dick's hunting trip, Joshua drove to Montana. He'd taken leave from work, arranged for Emma to stay with Erin and her daughter. They'd become close, the girls bonding over their shared experience of Anderson abuse. The hunting ranch was exactly where Tom's intelligence said it would be. Joshua hiked in from a different direction, avoiding the main road. moving through the forest like the ghost he'd been trained to be. He found their camp before they arrived. Luxury tents, a cooking setup that cost more than most people's cars, enough alcohol to stock a bar. Joshua didn't touch any of it. Instead, he hiked further into the wilderness, found a spot with good visibility and cell service, barely, and waited. Dick's group arrived Friday morning. 6 men total: Dick, Alan, Norman, and 3 dealership managers. They spent the day hunting, drinking, telling stories. Joshua watched through binoculars, noting their patterns, their equipment, their confidence. They were soft. City men playing at wilderness, relying on guides and gear and money to smooth over their lack of actual skill. Perfect. That night, after they'd drunk enough whiskey to ensure deep sleep, Joshua moved. He didn't sabotage their equipment. That would be too obvious. Instead, he simply relocated things. Moved their vehicle's keys. Adjusted their GPS units to show incorrect coordinates. Made small changes that wouldn't be noticed immediately, but would cascade into bigger problems. Saturday morning, the group woke with hangovers and started arguing about which direction to hunt. Their guide, a local ranch hand named Curtis, suggested one direction, but Dick overruled him, insisting on a different path. They set out, and Joshua followed at a distance. By midday, they were lost. Not dramatically lost, just turned around enough that they weren't sure which way led back to camp. Dick refused to admit the mistake, kept pushing forward. The guide was getting nervous, but Dick's authority kept everyone moving in the wrong direction. Joshua let them wander for hours. When they finally stopped to rest, exhausted and dehydrated, he made his move. He approached from downwind, silent, and when Dick separated from the group to relieve himself, Joshua was waiting. "Hello, Dick." Dick Anderson spun around, fumbling for the rifle he'd left with his gear. "Keenan, what the hell are you doing here?" "Teaching you a lesson." Dick's face purpled. "You threatening me, boy? You have any idea who you're dealing with?" "Yes. A man who tied my daughter to a tree and watched ants eat her alive. A man who thinks power and money put him above consequences." Joshua stepped closer. "But out here, Dick, none of that matters. Out here, it's just skills and knowledge and the ability to survive." "How are your skills, Dick? I'm going to have you arrested. This is stalking, harassment. You're lost in the Montana wilderness with a group of drunk, soft men who've never spent a real night outdoors. Your guide is competent, but you keep overruling him. You've got maybe 3 hours before it starts getting cold. You're dehydrated, and I saw you drain your water an hour ago. You're wearing the wrong boots for this terrain. Your feet are already blistering. And Dick," Joshua smiled, "I know exactly where you are. I know every trail, every water source, every shelter point. I could guide you out in 90 minutes. Or I could let nature teach you what it feels like to be helpless." Dick tried to bluster, but Joshua saw the fear in his eyes. The realization that money didn't matter here. That threats didn't matter. That for the first time in decades, Dick Anderson was at someone else's mercy. "Your group will find their way back eventually," Joshua said. "The guide knows enough to keep them safe. But you, Dick, I think you should experience a little of what Emma felt. The fear, the helplessness, the understanding that the people who are supposed to protect you have decided to hurt you instead. You're insane. No, I'm a father whose daughter was tortured while her mother watched. And I'm very, very patient." Joshua pulled out his phone, took a photo of Dick's terrified face. "This is going in my files. Evidence that you're not as tough as you pretend. That when faced with real danger, you fall apart." He turned to walk away, then paused. "Follow the stream downhill. It leads back toward the ranch. If you're smart, if you conserve energy and make good choices, you'll be back at camp by nightfall. If you're stupid, if you panic, if you do what your instincts tell you, you'll die out here. Your choice, Dick. Make it count." Joshua disappeared into the forest before Dick could respond. He circled back to where the main group was, made sure they found the trail. The guide was competent enough to get them back safely. But Dick Anderson spent the next 6 hours stumbling through the wilderness alone, convinced he was going to die, finally understanding what it felt like to be powerless and afraid. Joshua watched from a distance, ready to intervene if Dick actually faced serious danger. He wasn't trying to kill the man, just educate him. Dick made it back to camp after dark, exhausted and hypothermic, babbling about being stalked. His group thought he was drunk or suffering altitude sickness. The guide got him warmed up and hydrated. They cut the trip short, packed up, drove home early. Joshua was already back in Missouri by the time Dick's group made it to town. And he had what he needed. The photo of Dick's terrified face, proof that the great Dick Anderson was just a scared old man when stripped of his power. But that was just one piece. The real destruction was still coming. The Monday after the Montana trip, Dick Anderson called a family meeting. Joshua only knew about it because Tom had managed to plant listening devices in several Anderson properties during the chaos of the custody case. Strictly illegal, but Tom had friends who specialized in such things. Joshua listened to the recording that evening after Emma was asleep. Dick's voice, still rough from his wilderness ordeal. "Keenan is coming after us. He's not just fighting for custody. He's trying to destroy the family. The newspaper articles, the customer complaints, the insurance companies asking questions. This is coordinated. Shannon, what do you want us to do?" "Dick, fight back. He wants to play dirty? Fine. We go after his job, his reputation, his custody. I want Vincent to file for emergency custody review. I want private investigators digging into every corner of his life. I want him discredited, broke, and broken. Alan, what about criminal charges? He stalked you in Montana. That's illegal. Dick, no proof. My word against his, and I was drunk and lost. Won't stick." A pause. "But we can use it to paint him as unstable. Dangerous. A man so obsessed with revenge that he's willing to follow me across state lines. Norman, the dealerships are hurting. Sales are down 30%. If this continues." "Dick, then we need to control the narrative. Carol, you work your church connections. Frame this as a family being persecuted by an outsider. Shannon, you play the victim. Poor mother kept from her child by vindictive ex-husband. Alan, you handle the business side. Make sure our employees know that loyalty will be rewarded and disloyalty will be punished." The plan was classic Anderson. Use power, money, and connections to crush opposition. It had worked for decades. But Joshua had been preparing for this. The next day, he drove to a neighboring county and met with a federal investigator named Frederick Nelson. Tom had made the introduction. Nelson worked for the FBI's white-collar crime division and had been looking into Anderson Auto Empire for potential fraud. "We've had complaints for years," Nelson said. "But nothing stuck. Dick Anderson has friends in local law enforcement, friends in the DA's office. Every time we tried to build a case, it evaporated." Joshua handed over a flash drive. "This is 3 months of documentation. Customer complaints with evidence of fraud. Employee testimonies about wage theft and unsafe working conditions. Financial records showing shell companies and potential money laundering. And testimony from abuse victims showing a pattern of using power to escape consequences." Nelson opened the files, his expression growing more interested with each document. "Where did you get this?" "Concerned citizens. People who've been waiting for someone to take Dick Anderson seriously. This is extensive. If even half of this is accurate, we could build a RICO case." "How long?" "Months. Maybe a year. Federal cases take time." Nelson looked at Joshua. "Is this personal for you?" "Very. But that doesn't make it less true." "No," Nelson agreed. "Just makes it more satisfying." Joshua left that meeting feeling momentum building. Federal investigation would take time, but it was another thread pulling at the Anderson empire. Meanwhile, the newspaper articles continued. More ex-employees came forward with stories. More customers filed formal complaints. The local news picked up the story, ran a segment about the custody case and the allegations of abuse. Anderson Auto Empire's reputation, carefully built over 40 years, began to crumble in weeks. Dick tried to fight back. He gave interviews painting himself as a victim of a smear campaign, a good man being destroyed by a vengeful ex-son-in-law. But the narrative didn't stick. Too many people had stories. Too many victims were finally talking. Shannon filed for emergency custody review, claiming Joshua was brainwashing Emma against her family. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out. Joshua wasn't worried. He had Dr. Phillips's reports showing Emma's genuine trauma, recordings of Shannon's failed attempts at visitation, documentation of every Anderson family threat. What did worry him was the escalation. The Andersons were getting desperate, and desperate people were dangerous. His concern proved justified when Tom called with a warning. Dick's hired private investigators. 2 of them, former cops. They're digging into your background, looking for anything they can use. And Josh, they're not being subtle. They've contacted your ex-girlfriends, your colleagues, even tried to talk to Emma's teachers. Legal. Barely. But effective. They're looking for anything. Proof you're unstable, evidence of past violence, witnesses who'll say you're obsessed or dangerous. They won't find anything. Maybe not. But they'll try to create something if they can't find it. Be careful. Joshua doubled down on his own security, updated his home cameras, varied his routines, made sure Emma was never without supervision. He also asked Zachary to document his mental health, regular check-ins with his psychiatrist cousin, proof he was stable and processing the trauma appropriately. You're handling this better than most people would, Zachary said during one call. But Josh, I have to ask, are you planning something illegal? I'm planning to protect my daughter and make sure the people who hurt her face consequences. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I've got. Zachary sighed. Be smart. Emma needs you. Don't do anything that could take you away from her. I won't. But even as he said it, Joshua knew there was one more move to make. One final piece to ensure the Andersons could never threaten Emma again. He called Tom. I need a meeting with everyone Dick Anderson has hurt. Everyone willing to go on record. Can you organize it? How many people are we talking? All of them. Tom was quiet for a moment. That's a lot of people, Josh. Dozens. Maybe more. Then we'll need a big room. The meeting happened on a Saturday at a community center in the next county over. Joshua had expected maybe 20 people. 60 showed up. Ex-employees who'd been fired for questioning Dick's practices. Customers who'd been defrauded. Foster children now grown, still carrying scars from their time with the Andersons. Erin Strickland and her daughter. People who'd been sued into silence, blacklisted, professionally destroyed. Joshua stood before them and told Emma's story. Showed them the video, though several people had to leave the room. Then he explained what he'd been doing, the federal investigation, the media coverage, the systematic dismantling of Anderson power. I can't do this alone, he said. The Andersons have spent decades building a wall of fear around themselves. They've made you think you're powerless, that speaking up means losing everything. But that wall is cracking. And if we all push together, it falls. A woman in her 40s raised her hand. I worked at the dealership for 10 years. Dick fired me when I reported sexual harassment by one of his managers. Then he made sure I couldn't get hired anywhere in the county. I had to move, start over. What do you want from me? Your story, your testimony, your willingness to file formal complaints, to talk to investigators, to stop being silent. What's in it for us? Justice. The satisfaction of seeing Dick Anderson lose everything he built on the backs of people he hurt. And maybe, eventually, compensation if the federal case leads to restitution. An older man stood. I was one of the foster kids. Back in '84. Dick and Carol, his voice broke. They made us sleep in the shed, even in winter. Beat us if we complained. I've never talked about it because I didn't think anyone would believe me. I believe you, Joshua said. And so will a jury if it comes to that. One by one, people shared their stories. The room was heavy with decades of pain, abuse, and fear. But beneath it, something else was growing. Solidarity, determination, hope. By the end of the meeting, Joshua had commitments from 40 people willing to testify, to file complaints, to stand against the Andersons publicly. Tom collected contact information, started organizing subgroups, former employees, victims of abuse, fraud victims. This is a movement now, Tom said quietly as people filed out. You've given them permission to stop being afraid. The Andersons gave them reasons to be afraid. I'm just showing them they're not alone. As the room cleared, a young woman approached Joshua. She looked familiar, and he realized she resembled Alan. I'm Stacy Berg, she said. Alan's daughter. The one Aaron saved. Joshua's expression softened. I've heard a lot about you. How are you? Better now that I don't see the Andersons. But Mr. Keenan, Josh, I wanted you to know something. My dad called last week. He wanted me to testify against you in Shannon's custody appeal. Said you're dangerous, that Emma should be with her mother. Are you going to? Stacy shook her head. I'm going to testify for you. I'm going to tell the court what the Anderson family is really like. What they did to me, what I watched them plan to do to Emma. My dad thinks loyalty to family means protecting abusers. But real family protects the vulnerable. Joshua felt something in his chest loosen. Thank you. That means more than you know. Emma's lucky to have you. I wish I'd had someone fight for me like you're fighting for her. Your mom did fight for you. She got you out. Yeah, but she had to do it alone. You're building an army. Stacy smiled. That's going to make all the difference. 2 weeks later, Shannon's emergency custody hearing took place. The courtroom was even more packed than before. Joshua's coalition had spread the word, and people showed up to support him, to bear witness, to show the judge that the Andersons weren't the powerful, untouchable family they pretended to be. Vincent Price brought a child psychologist who claimed Emma was being alienated from her mother, that Joshua's influence was damaging her relationship with Shannon. He showed photos of Shannon looking tearful and broken, painted her as a victim of emotional abuse. Curtis countered with Dr. Phillips, who methodically destroyed the alienation argument with data, therapy notes, and Emma's own words. He brought Stacy Berg, who testified about her own experience with the Anderson family. He brought the federal investigator, Frederick Nelson, who testified that Anderson businesses were under investigation for fraud and that Dick Anderson's character was being questioned at the highest levels. And then Curtis did something unexpected. He called Dick Anderson to the stand. Dick was confident at first, playing the concerned grandfather, the successful businessman, the pillar of the community. But Curtis was relentless. "Mr. Anderson, how many employees have you fired in the past decade? I don't keep exact numbers. We have high standards. Would you say more than 50? Possibly. And how many of those employees filed wrongful termination suits? A few. Frivolous cases. 17 isn't a few, Mr. Anderson. And of those 17, how many were settled out of court with non-disclosure agreements?" Dick's jaw tightened. "That's standard business practice. Is it standard business practice to fire employees who report safety violations? Who question fraudulent sales practices? Who refuse to participate in illegal activities?" Vincent Price objected, but Judge Rivera allowed the questions. Curtis continued, pulling apart Dick's carefully constructed image piece by piece. Finally, Curtis pulled out Joshua's photo, Dick Anderson's terrified face in the Montana wilderness. "Mr. Anderson, do you recognize this photo?" Dick went pale. Where did you get that?" "Is that you, Mr. Anderson?" "Yes, but you look afraid." "What were you afraid of?" "Keenan was stalking me, threatening me." Joshua Keenan, who at the time was 3 states away attending to his daughter's recovery from the trauma you inflicted? The same Joshua Keenan who has multiple witnesses placing him in Missouri on the dates you claim he was in Montana? Dick sputtered. The photo had been a bluff. Joshua had been in Montana, but the date stamp was deliberately vague, and Tom had created alibi witnesses placing Joshua elsewhere. "You created this narrative because you're afraid, Mr. Anderson. Not of Joshua Keenan specifically, but of consequences. For the first time in your life, you're facing real accountability for your actions, and you're trying to redirect blame." The hearing ended badly for Shannon. Judge Rivera denied the emergency custody appeal and actually reduced Shannon's visitation to once per month instead of weekly. "Mrs. Keenan, you've shown no meaningful change in your behavior or understanding of why your actions were harmful," the judge said. "Until you can demonstrate genuine insight and separation from the family dynamics that enabled this abuse, I cannot in good conscience expand your access to Emma." Shannon left the courtroom in tears. Dick was furious but controlled himself this time, having learned that outbursts didn't help. The Anderson family retreated, and Joshua allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. But he wasn't done. Not yet. The federal investigation was progressing. Frederick Nelson called regularly with updates, subpoenas issued, documents seized, witnesses interviewed. The case against Anderson Auto Empire was building into something substantial. Meanwhile, the local damage continued. 2 of Dick's 3 dealerships were now in serious financial trouble. Franchise corporations had pulled their brands from Anderson lots, citing reputation concerns. The bank was asking questions about loan collateral. Dick's insurance agency lost its major contracts. Norman Barber was forced out by the parent company. The commercial properties Dick owned were harder to rent as tenants didn't want to be associated with the Anderson name. Joshua watched it all unfold with quiet satisfaction. He'd set the dominoes in motion, but the Anderson family's own history of abuse, fraud, and cruelty was what actually toppled them. 6 months after the Honey incident, Dick Anderson declared bankruptcy. The dealerships were seized by creditors. The insurance agency dissolved. The commercial properties went into foreclosure. Dick tried to salvage something, but he'd built his empire on fear and favors, and both had evaporated. The people he'd controlled turned on him. The officials he'd bribed distanced themselves. The community he'd dominated celebrated his fall. Carol Anderson filed for divorce. taking what assets she could protect. Alan left town, last seen working at a car lot in Arizona. Norman Barber had a heart attack from the stress, survived, but diminished. Shannon moved in with her mother, working retail, a shadow of her former self. The federal case resulted in convictions for fraud, tax evasion, and racketeering. Dick Anderson was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Several dealership managers who'd participated in the fraud got lesser sentences. The court ordered restitution to defrauded customers, millions of dollars that would take decades to repay. But for Joshua, the real victory wasn't Dick's prison sentence or financial ruin. It was Emma. 8 months after the honey incident, Emma had her first full week without nightmares. Dr. Phillips reduced therapy to once per week. Emma made new friends at school, joined the science club, started smiling again. Shannon's monthly visits continued, supervised by a court monitor. The visits were strained but peaceful. Shannon was in therapy herself now, finally separated from her family's influence, slowly beginning to understand the damage she'd been part of. She might never be the mother Emma deserves, Dr. Phillips told Joshua, but she's trying to be better than she was. That's something. Joshua took Emma hiking in the mountains where he'd grown up, taught her to track animals, to read weather patterns, to respect nature's power. She was cautious at first. The outdoors carried trauma now, but slowly, she reclaimed it. The forest became a place of wonder again, not fear. On the anniversary of the honey incident, Joshua and Emma planted a tree in their new backyard. A young oak, like the one she'd been tied to, but this one was theirs. A symbol of growth and healing. Will we always remember the bad thing, Daddy? Emma asked as they patted soil around the sapling's roots. Probably, Joshua said honestly. But Emma, remembering isn't the same as being stuck. You're healing. You're growing. And someday, this tree will be tall and strong, and you'll look at it and remember that you survived. That you're stronger than what happened to you. Emma considered this, then nodded. Like you, Daddy. You're strong too. We're both strong. And we're strong together. Tom Beach came over for dinner that evening. He'd become a fixture in their lives. Honorary uncle, trusted friend, guardian when Joshua needed backup. He brought Stacy and Aaron too, the extended family they'd chosen. Over burgers and lemonade, Tom raised a glass. To Emma, who survived. To Joshua, who fought. And to justice, which sometimes takes longer than we'd like, but arrives in the end. They toasted, and Emma grinned, holding up her lemonade. Later, after everyone left and Emma was asleep, Joshua stood in the backyard looking at the young oak tree. It would take years to grow tall, decades to reach maturity. But it would get there, one season at a time. Just like Emma. Just like healing. His phone buzzed, a news alert. Dick Anderson's appeal had been denied. 8 years in federal prison was now certain. Joshua felt no triumph, no satisfaction. Just a quiet sense of completion. The battle was over. Emma was safe. The Andersons had faced consequences. Justice, imperfect and delayed, had arrived. He went inside, checked on Emma one more time, sleeping peacefully, her penguin tucked under one arm, and finally let himself rest. The war was won. The healing could begin. And Joshua Keenan, wilderness rescue coordinator turned single father, protector, and avenger, could finally just be dad. The role that mattered most. The only role he'd ever really wanted. Emma was safe. The Andersons were broken. And Joshua had proven that sometimes the best revenge isn't just destruction. It's building something better from the ashes. A life where his daughter could grow up safe, loved, and free from the shadows of those who'd hurt her. That was victory. That was enough. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.